3, go. Good afternoon. On behalf of the TMA Communications Committee, please join me in welcoming Ian Fredericks, an Executive Vice President with Hilco Merchant Resources. Given this time of social distancing, unfortunately, we haven't been able to do this in person, but we wanted to take this opportunity to give you a chance as one of our Value Platinum sponsors to introduce yourself and tell us more about your firm. Ian, thanks so much for joining me, and it's great to have an opportunity to speak with you.
Great, thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you.
Great. Why don't you start off with basics? Tell me a little bit about Hilco Merchant Resources, what you guys do, and what you do specifically.
Sure, so Hilco Merchant Resources is the inventory fixed asset arm, sort of the retail arm of Hilco Global. We primarily focus on valuing, monetizing, and assisting retailers with various special projects. So that can be a event sale, it can be a store closing sale, it can be going out of business sales, or it can be helping them monetize excess inventory. You know, in today's COVID-related world, you have all of those things going on. You know, with the shutdown that happened, you know, beginning in sort of March, everything basically stopped, and now a lot of retailers, a lot of suppliers, manufacturers, they have excess inventory that they need to get rid of, whether that's in a store or sitting in a warehouse somewhere. We're able to help them monetize all of that. And then we've branched off into several other businesses. We now have a lending arm where we do some strategic financing type solutions and things like that. It's all centered around the retail space.
Interesting. You mentioned kind of how COVID has changed a little bit. You say retail, and I think everyone says, well, that's one industry that's been distressed significantly over the last couple of years. Can you kind of get into what it was like prior to COVID, and then what you're kind of doing and what you're seeing differently now post-COVID? And we've been a couple months into the post-COVID world.
Sure. So I would say pre-COVID, brick and mortar retail was definitely feeling distressed for a lot of different reasons. That could have been, you know, just that, you know, the Amazon or, you know, Walmart marketplaces of the world were taking more and more, you know, of their share. It could have been, you know, that you had capital structures that were just where you had too much debt and too much leverage on them. Or it could have just been that, you know, consumer preferences had changed and, you know, retailers were, you know, struggling, you know, and so you had kind of it had definitely accelerated over the last, you know, couple of years, where you had more and more retailers feeling that distress and reaching a breaking point. I think what COVID did was really to retailers that were in that sort of situation, it definitely advanced it. It made the situation, you know, it made the breaking point come a lot sooner than it otherwise would. And then I think for retailers that weren't as close to that breaking point, you know, it maybe advanced things. So we saw an initial, you know, sort of spike in filings, you know, happen with retailers. And then you saw a lot of distress in retailers that weren't as close to that breaking point. So I think for some of those, they might be a, you know, Q3, Q4 type distress or breaking point situation. And then, you know, you have other retailers that are, you know, really good, solid businesses with, you know, where the consumer's still very interested. And I think those businesses will come out just fine on the other end. They're going to need some lender concessions, you know, or some vendor concessions or things like that, where they're really going to have to work in partnership with those constituents to, you know, to make it through the other end. But I think there are a lot of retail businesses that fit in that category.
And in that last category of these, you know, generally healthy ones, but for what's happened in COVID, what kind of services does Hilco provide, or what would you do if you're approached by one of these, what we're calling these healthier retail companies?
Yeah, so I mean, look, I think at any given point in time, even the healthiest company has assets that are no longer necessarily core, or locations that aren't doing as well as other locations for one reason or another. We can certainly help them with monetizing those assets to turn them into cash. We can certainly help them, you know, close those stores, or, you know, maybe they want to relocate those assets to a different store. We can help them with that as well. So really it's along their non-core. And then obviously, if I flip over and put my sort of other lending hat on, to the extent they need financing to be able to bridge this gap, that's something where, because of our expertise and ultimately what the value of their assets is, we're sort of, COVID, you obviously can't sell really anything when you're in a completely, stalled, shut down period. But what we've seen as you've come out of that is that, consumer behavior has switched somewhat, but hasn't switched as drastically, I think, as people thought it was going to. So we still have a very good understanding of what the asset value is. We can still lend against that asset value and bridge the gap so those healthy retailers have the capital they need to weather this storm and then come out the other end.
So I suspect that as part of your, work with these companies, you go out there and look at the assets and kind of generally meet with the clients and spend a lot of time, in the field with these clients. And obviously social distancing has made things more difficult. How have you guys adjusted to that? What's that looking like these days for you?
So it's been a lot more Zoom conference calls like this. I didn't know I would say I didn't know how many video conference platforms existed until now. Every day there seems to be a new call and a new platform that I wasn't familiar with. So, it's been a lot more conversations like this where you're trying to make them as personal as possible by having that sort of face-to-face interaction. But everybody's in the same boat. So it's not just us, everyone's dealing with the same thing. In that sense, it's very different. We used to spend a lot of time in our clients' offices or meeting them in different places, and everybody's had to adjust. There was a little bit of a learning curve and everybody getting used to this new way of doing business. But after a week or two, it became very comfortable and everybody was in the same boat. So, you got used to people's dogs barking in the background or children needing help with homework. I mean, it's the same thing for sort of everyone, and everyone has been, I would say, regardless of who we talk to, everybody's super patient with, what might happen. And we're super patient with our clients too, in terms of the technical difficulties or the family interruptions or whatever. But business has gone on, we've adapted, our clients have adapted. And I would say, it's certainly opened people's eyes to the fact that you can conduct business in a remote fashion, where I think there were a lot of people who maybe didn't think you could or couldn't do it as well. So.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. And my family has noticed that as well. And they have their doubts if I ever get back to the office. But I will be going back to the office. I mean, do you think it's going to be remote for the future, or we're going to find some sort of hybrid? That's what I'm suspecting from the legal standpoint. There will be some more work from home, which is more acceptable, but we may be moving into a new format.
I would say, so for our business, what we've been doing is obviously following the Illinois related restrictions. But what we're doing, Hilco specific, is we are starting to, the geography is playing a factor in which offices can open when. But our main headquarters, which is in Northbrook, north of Chicago, that office is actually opening officially next Monday. I think that's the 21st or 22nd, something like that. We're going to open then, where there are a ton of new policies and procedures that you have to adhere to. We've obviously made some physical changes to the office to deal with social distancing, and then when people are moving around, whether they have to wear masks or things like that. And then also put in place some tracing or tracking procedures. So where you do have contact, you have to take note of that. So, if somebody does get sick down the road, we can trace back who's had contact with them. That's sort of the general opening. As far as requiring people to come to the office, we've really left that up to the individual. And really said, if you feel comfortable returning to the office based on what we put in place, then you're welcome to return to the office. If you still don't feel comfortable in light of the restrictions, policies and procedures we put in place, are there other things we could do to make you comfortable? And if still, the employee's not comfortable, then they'll continue to work from home until they do feel comfortable to come back into the office. So, and again, that's geography, office by office. We do have some of our other business units have offices in downtown Manhattan or in Manhattan, and those offices are obviously operating very differently, because of what happened in Manhattan and just different, location. So.
Sure. My firm's got 24 offices around the U.S., so we're, doing things differently. I'm based out of Chicago as well, and so we're following something similar to you. The tracking part is really interesting. Curious to see how that turns out.
That actually came out yesterday. That was new yesterday. So we got all the other stuff, and then that one popped up, and I was like, "Oh, that's creative."
Very cool. Well, Ian, I want to thank you so much for your time, and again, thank you and Hilco for your support of TMA Chicago. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to meeting you in person and continued support. So thanks so much.
Yeah, likewise. I really appreciate the opportunity, and we think very highly of the TMA organization. So it's easy for us to to be such a big supporter. It's a great organization. So thank you for this opportunity, and look forward to meeting you in person one day.